Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Immigration Fridays. I'm your host, Prashanthi, and we're here again to navigate the ever evolving maze of US immigration law. This week, we will discuss employment based green card interviews. Firstly, it's very important to understand what is an employment based adjustment of status interview and why do they hold these interviews, and what is entailed in such an interview. So the primary purpose of the interview is to verify the authenticity of the applicant's employment based petition. They want to make sure that the person is eligible, that he meets all the eligibility criteria for adjustment. They want to make sure that the job offer is available. They want to make sure that the employer has the job and that the employment is not speculative. They also want to make sure that the employer is not blacklisted in any way, and they want to make sure that you have originals of the supporting documents that you submitted with your adjustment application. What do you do when you get such an interview? How do you prepare for it? First, most importantly, I suggest that you contact an immigration attorney if you are called for such an interview. And if you're not able to do so, then follow these steps. Review the case thoroughly that you have submitted to USCIS or your employer has submitted, and look for any potential red flags. Were you ever arrested? Any out of status period, any period where you were not paid by your employer? Review that and come and make sure that you have an explanation for it, or you have some kind of a defense against it. For example, if you were out of status for any period of time, but you left and re-entered the country, most probably they would only look at your status from the time of your last entry. Second, prepare yourself thoroughly for the types of questions that might be asked. So if you're going to an attorney, make sure that they prepare you with the type of questions. They have a mock interview for you, and so that you familiarize yourself with what the potential questions are that an officer can ask you. Third, go through your entire application, your 485 application that you submitted to USCIS. Go through every column of that application. Make sure you review every document that was submitted by your attorney or your employer along with the adjustment of status application. So you're not caught off guards when the officer asks you a question that's in your 485 form. Most importantly, go through the questions with reference to have you ever been arrested, all the questions where they ask you about security concerns, any out of status period, any criminal activity. Go through all those questions, and when you are answering the question, make sure that you understand the question thoroughly before you answer it. If you don't understand the question, just ask them to repeat it, but don't just say yes when you don't understand a question, right? So that's very important. Make sure you gather and organize all your documents properly in the order based on the interview notice. The interview notice will usually have a list of documents. Make sure you have original documents in one folder and a photocopy of all those documents in another folder, so that in case they don't have some document, you can immediately give them a photocopy of it, and they don't have to go and make photocopies. I still suggest that you get an attorney to represent you at these interviews, because the attorney will ensure that your rights are protected, and they will ensure that the interview is conducted in a fair and in accordance with the law, in a fair manner and in accordance with the law. The attorney will also help clarify legal points or issues that may arise during the interview. So this will help your green card to get approved faster, and it will avoid any potential letters after that asking for clarification, right? So they can clarify them on the spot. For example, just to give you a personal example, I attended an interview where the officer said that the person may not have been in status because they don't see pay stubs for a period of 6 months. Then I had to explain that at that period of time, the applicant was outside the country and therefore did not require to be paid in the United States, right? There was another instance in which the person was actually out of status, but it was for a period of less than 6 months. And I informed the officer that there is a law 245K, which based on which, which is a defense against being out of status, and based on which their case can still be approved. So this avoided the case getting denied, and then having to go and file for an appeal, and then raising the issue of 245K as a defense. In addition, there's some general information that you have to know when you're going for an interview. Make sure you always arrive on time. Allow yourself extra time to go through security. Make sure that your cell phone is always off. Dress appropriately. Dress in business attire. You're not going for a barbecue. You're not going for a wedding. So don't overdress. Dress in business attire so that you look professional. Then let's discuss what documents are needed to bring to the interview. What do you need to bring? First, I would definitely take a medical exam and submit a sealed copy of that, a sealed original of the medical exam. Even if you have submitted a medical exam earlier, if it's been more than a year, or if you have to take an updated COVID vaccine and you have not, and in the previous medical exam that was not done, I would submit getting a new medical exam. This will just avoid delay. In case they need a new medical exam, then they will give you a letter at the end of the interview, and then they will not be able to adjudicate your adjustment until you submit that medical exam. What other documents do you need to bring to your interview? Bring originals of all the documents, such as the appointment letter, your passport, your birth certificates, marriage certificate, divorce judgments if applicable, work authorization card, your I-94 originals, I-20 if you've been on an F1, your offer of employment from your employer, or a 485J, as that is usually used in place of an offer of employment nowadays, a signed 485J. If there's a new employer or if there are any changes to your employment, copies of pay stubs, again originals, to show that you're in status and you're continuing to work for your employer who's sponsoring you. Evidence that you qualify for your position. If you filed your perm based on a bachelor's in computer science and 2 years of experience, submit that bachelor in computer science degree, submit the original. Court disposition. So if applicable, if you've ever been to court, if you have been convicted of any offense, make sure you take the original court disposition documents. What type of questions are asked at the interview? So how do you prepare? What type of questions? It's important to know this so that again you're not caught unaware at your interview. So generally, the questions that will be asked at the interview by the officer are to assess your eligibility for permanent residence. And so the questions will, since it's an employment-based interview, will talk about the applicant's, your work history, your current job, your job description. They will check that across the perm to make sure that it's the same job that was approved under perm. So it's important to go through your perm application, your labor certification application as well, to make sure that you know what has been written in the perm application, and you don't say something that is contradictory to what's in your perm application with reference to your job. Questions about the employer. Who's your employer? How do you work? Do you work remote? Again, be aware of what's written in your labor certification. Who's the client? What tools are used in your job? Again, look at your perm application. What kind of business does the employer have? Also questions about your education, your qualifications, your work experience, education about your immigration history, make sure you take all your previous approvals. They want to make sure that you have not violated immigration law in any way. Questions about your family. If you're dependents, then you need to take your marriage certificates, especially for your spouse, if they've been called for the interview as well, to prove that it's a bona fide marriage. Questions about admissibility to the US. So any history of visa denials, deportations, any criminal history, all this comes up in questions that are asked by the officer at your immigration interview. So when after they've finished asking you all these questions, you've submitted all the documents, they've looked at all the originals. The question is now, what happens next? When do you get your decision? In some cases, so it really depends on the officer. In some cases, they will complete the entire interview, and the officer might tell you that everything looks good, and pending final security clearance, you will get an approval. In some other cases, the officers will not say anything. They'll just take a more formal position, and they will simply say that they will let you know about the decision. It'll be mailed to you. If the officer requires further information, they might, at the end of the interview, just give you a letter saying what additional documentation they need and when to submit it by. The officer also might just not say anything at the end of the interview, but send you something by mail after they have reviewed the entire petition again and also had the supervisor review it. So if you do get a letter in the mail, make sure you respond by the deadline date, otherwise your 485 will get denied. Make sure you update your address with the officer, very important. And if there's any other discrepancies that you might want to address in the 485 form, say your name is misspelled, date of birth, maybe your address has changed, this is a good time to do it at your interview appointment. Last but not the least, your priority date. If your priority date is not available, then they will take the interview and then they will put the case on hold until the priority date is available. But they will not, in most instances, have another interview. So at least you're done with that. So that is some information with reference to how to attend an immigration interview, employment-based interview, what documents to take, how to prepare. I hope that this video was useful for you. And now that's a wrap for our Immigration Fridays this week. Stay tuned for another episode next week, and make sure you subscribe and like our channel. Thank you very much.